No sooner had Erik woken up than he knew something was not quite right. He just knew it. It was like that feeling that you have when you think you have lost your wallet and you slowly reach behind with a sense of dread that tightens around you to feel your back trouser pocket, hoping that you won't find it empty. That was the feeling that Erik had as he slowly moved his hand down his stomach, and then nothing. The thing that had always been there ever since he could remember was gone. He pulled the quilt down and stared at his stomach. It was perfectly smooth. There was not even a mark or a scar. Not that he had ever had an operation. But then he couldn't understand where it had gone, or even, more to the point, now that he thought about it, how it had gone. He pushed the quilt right to the bottom of the bed with his feet and stared at the bed sheet. For a second he thought he saw it, yellow and curled like a dead worm, nestled in a crease in the sheet. But on closer inspection, it was only a quaver left over from the packet he had eaten just before going to sleep last night. That apart, there was nothing on the bed, and nor was there anything to speak of on the floor. He decided not to mention it to his parents. After all, he was 16 and a half, and that was old enough to have sex. In theory, it was highly unlikely that anyone would want to have sex with him now, given that he was incomplete. For some reason, he was not frightened. Later, he would be surprised that he was not more disturbed by this most unusual event. He had never heard of this happening to anyone else before. These things didn't normally just drop off like that, and certainly, even if they didn't disappear into thin air. Thinking briefly about the cat and whether it could have crept into his room during the night, he got up and went to the bathroom and proceeded to brush his teeth. That was when he realized that it was rugby that afternoon, and that meant showers. Communal showers, of course. His face reddened just thinking about standing in the showers between hot sprays of steaming water with his blankness. That was the only word that came to mind. In the end, he managed to avoid his absent part being noticed by anyone. In the showers and changing rooms, he became adept at walking with his arm in front of him so that his hand covered the smooth patch of skin that now marked him out as being different to anyone else. Although he felt incomplete, there was nothing he could not do that others could, except, perhaps, have a piercing in that part, which he was occasionally envious of. And indeed, he sometimes felt special, because as time passed, he began to think of himself as unique. He never approached a doctor about it, but he did search the internet and he never came across anyone else with the same affliction apart from one case, but that was a fictional character in a science fantasy novel. Over the years, he also naturally avoided situations where he could be exposed. The only person he ever properly told was Nadia, his wife, who, shortly after they first met, came across the problem the first time they had sex. She was surprisingly unconcerned, although insatiably curious, but eventually, he persuaded her that it should be their secret, and he believed that she had honored that pact. At some point in the future, it was obvious that he would need to see a doctor, and then the shit would hit the fan, as it were. But so far, almost 15 years after the event, he had avoided any medical complications, and he would cross that bridge only when it was necessary. He had only once come close to revealing his uniqueness to anyone else, and that was at work during an icebreaker session as part of a training course. They had all been placed into pairs and instructed to tell their partner something about themselves that nobody else knew. The idea was that they would each then reveal their partner's secret to the group as a whole. When it came to his turn, he just blurted it out. In truth, he had never meant to say it, but in the absence of anything more interesting to say, and with panic building, he just said, "I don't have a belly button." Of course, everyone laughed, believing him to be joking. Last week had been a momentous week because Nadia had announced that she was pregnant. Erik couldn't help thinking that there was a possibility, however small, that their child, his child, would be like him. Soon he may not be unique, and there may be another person like him. Although he had never really thought about it that way before, he now realized that this was something he wanted more than anything else he could think of.